This is our last interview of EASD 19, and actually could be with no one more appropriate than the president-elect of EASD, Stefano Del Prato. Welcome.
Thank you.
What have you made of the trials that have been presented this year? Because there's been a lot, haven't there?
Oh yeah, this was a fantastic meeting. Actually, it was so much that sometimes it was difficult to follow all of them. So maybe I'll not be able to really be objective in terms of whatever has been presented, but I can tell you what I think was of importance here. So there's been a number of trials, and of course I cannot help myself without mentioning the Verify, because I was one of the investigators in the Verify. And Verify, I think it's quite an interesting study because, first of all, it's a study that's been designed to last for 5 years, which is not that usual, if you think, but also was addressing what you think may be a sort of a simple question, but quite an important question because it may rectify what is one of the current recommendations that is in the ADA EASD recommendation for the treatment of hyperglycemia type 2 diabetes. And this is what is the potential advantage, effect, and safety of using a combination treatment early on in type 2 diabetes individual as compared to the traditional stepwise approach, starting with one, waiting to that treatment to fail, and then to move on and increasing the treatment. So and I think Verify was important because for the first time we have the evidence that starting with 2 drugs at the very start of the disease, it is possible to achieve better glycemic control earlier on. It is possible to sustain that glycemic control for a longer time. And because of that, we may have the opportunity to provide a better opportunity to reduce also the risk of complications. And what we do hope that the Verify will be used to change the current recommendation of the ADA EASD consensus. Right now, the recommendation for a combination treatment is for people presenting at the time of the diagnosis with IA1C, but in Verify, people that have been recruited in the study had a very low glycated hemoglobin. It was between 6.5 and 7.5. So I think it's a new information, and an information that can change in the future the way we start treating the patient with type 2 diabetes. Then there were other trials, of course. There have been reports from the DAPA-HF, which is the effect of the SGLT2 on the heart failure. Heart failure is a very large and a common problem for type 2 diabetic individuals. Heart failure is more common in type 2 diabetic individuals. Once a patient has a heart failure, the cardiovascular mortality risk is increased by far. So having the possibility now to use drugs that can reduce that risk is a significant achievement, I would say. And there's been data presented with the use of dapagliflozin, but we know from the literature that also other SGLT2 may provide that potential advantage.
Of course, a cardiologist presenting here is rather unusual, so is a diabetologist going to be taking over in the cardiology congresses?
You know, I had some time, interesting discussion with my cardiologist fellow. They were trying to teach me that it's important to intervene, to open up arteries and so on and so forth. And I was trying to convince them that cardiovascular disease is metabolic in nature, because the process that leads to the formation of the plaque is because of the metabolic alteration. Then we need very good cardiologists to open up those arteries. But ideally, we would like to prevent that obstruction, isn't it, in the artery?
Indeed. And actually, it does make the point that, and we've mentioned it several times during EASD Live, that the trials that are presented here are really important in changing practice. These are not just of esoteric interest to researchers, these change practice.
Yeah, they change practice, but I think one of the value of this Congress is that you have results from clinical trials that can change the practice, but you also have bench work that right now is not yet changing the practice, but may provide new target, new treatment, new way to approach the disease that maybe in the future will change the clinical practice as well. So I think it's a continuum what we can appreciate here in this Congress, from the bench work translated into the clinical practice, and then what is the effect of that clinical practice in the health of so many people with diabetes.
And there's another bit of it, isn't there? Because the New England Journal of Medicine, in its commentary on Verify, commentary on DAPA-HF, made the point that actually some of the things that really should be changing practice are not. They haven't been introduced as widely as possible. And that's another role for EASD, and actually in your role as President-elect, to persuade people worldwide.
The only way we have to persuade people is, first of all, to provide strong, solid scientific evidence. And I think this is the main goal and objective of an organization like the EASD. The EASD is by nature a scientific organization, so we need to be very strong and careful in the kind of information they're providing, and I think it's the best way. Then the EASD is also involved in other activities that may be useful in changing also the uptake of a new opportunity for treatment. Is the teaching, is the training, is the participation in the activity of the UDF, the European Diabetes Forum, where all the stakeholders can get together and to try to elaborate strategy of communication or strategy that may facilitate the implementation of new opportunities. So I think that EASD is playing really a central role in this. It's science on one side, it's education on the other side, and it's also supporting some of the activities that may help in spreading through the European countries in a more effective manner what's new is out there to try to improve the expectation of people with diabetes.
And the other thing that you had here was some absolutely magnificent prize lectures. They were just wonderful.
Thank you very much for raising this, because when you were asking me at the beginning, the first question was, what is the main information, what's the best? And I think that we had really the fortune to listen to fantastic prize lectures.
Fantastic.
They were incredible example of how you can really span from basic research to clinical, and some of this lecture has been just fantastic because it was an example of how you can translate bench work into the clinical setting.
Steve Kahn was a particular
Dan
example.
Drucker.
Yes.
But even if you think Philip Knoop was another example, they were just fantastic, and they honored the EASD in an incredible manner.
Well, thank you. And what are you going to be looking forward to as President-elect? Because the next meeting is in Vienna.
Yeah, the next meeting is in Vienna. So Vienna means classic music, means Mozart. So we will try to stay in the tradition of the EASD, to have a classical Congress with a lot of information, but maybe with a twist of a modernity.
Thank you so much, Stefano Del Prato. Well, that's the end of EASD Live for this year. I've so enjoyed being here with you, and I've fantastically enjoyed the sessions here, especially that Steve Kahn lecture. And remember, you can see all those presentations on EASD's website. Goodbye for now.